A very good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all participants wherever they are in the world. I am absolutely delighted to welcome all of you to this session. We have a range of great speakers, people with huge experiences, who will discuss with us the challenges and the successes in moving towards sustainable energy, as well as talk about how they have enabled the transition to low carbon futures. As we look to the future, it is now becoming evident that this low carbon future in the electricity generation industry is the way to go. And this is for many reasons. The first reason, of course, is economic. We have seen a decline in prices globally. And what we see is that today, renewable energy prices are competitive with fossil fuel electricity prices. But at the same time, we are also seeing that the challenges of providing electricity to all, the challenges of changing the current distribution infrastructure, which is based on fossil fuels, which is based on central stations generating electricity, is not all that easy to change. And more importantly, we are also seeing that the players who are coming into this market, particularly on the supply side, are different from the players who have traditionally been part of the electricity generation industry. So whether we talk in terms of the institutional governance, whether we talk in terms of technology, whether we talk in terms of finance, this is a new world that we are looking at. Obviously, we would like this transition to be as quick as possible, as accelerated as possible. And consequently, we are looking at ways in which we can learn from each other. And international cooperation becomes very important. Because international cooperation is obviously a way of us to share with each other the kinds of learnings that we have, so that everybody doesn't have to reinvent the wheel as they go ahead. More importantly, it is also important that we are able to build on the successes of each other, not just on the failures of each other. So whether we look at the implementation part, the success part, the international cooperation part, or the technical or financial implementation, we see a huge opportunity to rapidly move to a zero carbon future in the electricity generation business. Today, we will be sharing the experience that we have had in Indonesia and in China and in India. And we have Mr. Nuki Utama, who is the Executive Director of the ASEAN Center for Energy, who will be talking about the international cooperation in accelerating the transition to low-carbon electricity in the ASEAN region. We'll have Mr. PC Maithani, a Senior Advisor in the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in India, who will speak about the transition to renewable electricity in India. Then we have Dr. Tareq Emtairah, who is the Director of the Energy Branch in UNIDO, who will talk about international cooperation and the acceleration. And finally, we have Mr. Tony Clamp from the Green Climate Fund. He's the Director ad interim of the private sector facility and would share with us thoughts on the financing of this transition. After that, we look forward to your questions, which we will put to the panel. And finally, we wrap up in about an hour and a half. Without further ado, let me request Mr. Utama, Nuki Utama, to share his thoughts with us, to share the experience that the ASEAN has had in moving towards a low carbon transition. Mr. Utama, all yours.
Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry Japan, or METI, New Energy Industrial Technology Development Organization, NEDO, distinguished participants from private sectors, academia, and government officials. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all of you. My name is Nuki Agya Utama, and on behalf of the ASEAN Center for Energy, I would like to express my highest appreciation and convey gratitude to ICEF for inviting me to deliver my presentation titled International Cooperation in Accelerating ASEAN Low Carbon Transition. The ASEAN Center for Energy itself is a think tank organization under 10 ASEAN member states and working particularly on energy sectors. We do have a backbone activities in energy sectors, and we call it the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAC. And currently, we are on the end of the stage 1 or phase 1 and going on the phase 2. Basically, this year, we are drafting the second phase, which will be started next year or 2021. The main theme of the APAC, in short, from the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation is the enhancing energy connectivity and market integration in ASEAN to achieve energy security, accessibility, affordability, and sustainability for all. We do have 7 program areas. First is the ASEAN Power Grid. This ASEAN Power Grid is a plan of the member state to be connected in terms of the transmission, sharing the resource as well as the demand. The next activities is the Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline, followed by the coal and clean coal technology. And also we do have energy efficiency and conservation. And of course we have renewable energy activities. In terms of the policy and planning, we have program area we call the regional energy policy and planning. And last but not least is the civilian nuclear energy. In terms of the renewable energy, the member state agreed on the increasing RE target in 2025 by 23% from all of those total primary energy supply. In the energy efficiency, we have a target. We call it the energy intensity target to reduce 20% in this year. And likely, we already achieved more than 20%, under 24% in this year. And the member state also have a more ambitious target to reduce the EI target based on 2005 level in 2025 to 30%. ACE, along with energy authorities and the ministers in 10 member states, works together to implement APAC, serving as a blueprint for better cooperation towards enhancing energy sectors. And of course, keeping regions' energy security, development, energy sustainability, as well as environmentally friendly. And our works and our activities has been also assisted by the various dialogue partners and also international organizations over the years. Next main activities is strategic planning. We have the activities under the ASEAN Interconnection Master Plan Studies, or AIMS3. This one is supporting the ASEAN Power Grid program area under APIC and still ongoing project. And the concerns to be addressed such as the rapid change on economic landscape and electricity supply industry, RE integration, of course including 23% ASEAN RE targets under energy mix by 2025, and exploring an opportunity and benefit of having higher variable RE. Emergence of new technologies with the lower cost in the future, as well as concerning on sustainability and advancing for multilateral power trade. In regard with the EE financial mechanism, we do have also activities working together with JAIF under Japan ASEAN cooperation. The objective of this activities is to promote high performance financing schemes for energy efficiency projects implementation in the region. Including over there is the electricity system, energy price, EE and RE targets, regulation and target group. Financial system, including the active institution, risk appetite, and also green finance regulation. On the mechanism, we have taxes, bonds, as well as ESCOs. On the enabling policies economic assessment, we have activities called the levelized cost of electricity for selected renewable energy technologies in the ASEAN member states. The implementing organization is GIZ, working together with us. And the research summary and findings, including monitoring RE LCOE costs, changes on the grid parity and competitiveness with conventional electricity generation costs. Incorporate 5 selected RE technologies with more than 100 project samples across 9 AMS. The cost of RE technologies are on a declining trend and could potentially compete with conventional energy source in the region. Enabling policies including inclusive growth, the practical experience on prospect of energy accessibility in ASEAN. The research summary, such as the current energy access status of IMS, status quo, targets, and also relative policies, problems, and challenges. Solution to isolated island and rural as well as the remote areas. Best practices and experience from various countries. Analysis on key countries and relative proposed solution. On the Sustainable Development Goals, we're working together with UNESCAP on SDG 7, and this research summary such as electrification, clean cooking, modern renewable energy, as well as energy efficiency. On the capacity building and information sharing, we do have a project called the ASEP, or ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, dealing with the climate-related energy issues. The work is on the capacity building as well as the public awareness and also information sharing, such as the policy brief, database and web page, research network, as well as various articles such as newsletter, insight, and op-ed. Apart from that, we also working together with association worldwide, such as Agya or ASEAN Photovoltaic Industry Association, as well as the Global Solar Council on webinar activities. We also have some activities under other international organizations such as IEA and ARENA on the energy efficiency as well as renewable energy roadmap. On the clean coal technology, we're working together with the World Coal Association as well as Japan Coal on the policy report as well as strategic report on how clean coal can be implemented in the region. And we also working on the nuclear issues with some institutions worldwide, such as Japanese Atomic Agency and also ASEAN TOM and as well as international institution worldwide. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a nice day, and please stay safe and stay healthy.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am PC Maithani, working with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India. Thanks for the opportunity. I will briefly present India's strides and outlook in renewable energy. While supporting about 18% of the world population, India uses only 6% of the world's primary energy and 5.3% of electricity. Our development aspirations are towards increasing energy and electricity consumption and progressively lower carbon intensity of the economy. In this background, India considers development and deployment of renewable energy to be of national strategic importance. The key drivers for renewable energy are achieving energy security, energy access, and reducing the carbon footprints of the economy. Renewables are central to achieving India's commitment under Paris Climate Agreement. India has committed to have about 40% electric installed capacity from non-fossil fuel based energy sources by 2030. Declining cost, improving efficiency, and reliability have helped India's pursuit of a low carbon development pathway. Renewable energy in India has been enabled by strong policy and regulatory interventions. The Electricity Act 2003 enabled a systematic framework for development of renewables. Over the years, several policy measures and programs have been undertaken for accelerated penetration of renewables in the country. Some important policy milestones have been reflected in this slide. These include the 2008 National Action Plan on Climate Change that led to launching National Solar Mission in the year 2010. In the year 2014, target of 175 gigawatt renewable power capacity by 2022 was declared. In the year 2018, National Trajectory for Renewable Purchase Obligations was notified. In the same year, the provision of socializing the interstate transmission costs of renewables was enacted. These measures accelerated deployment and facilitated a pan-India renewable energy market. You can see India's electricity sector is undergoing a transition, the aggressive growth of renewable energy capacity being the primary driver for this change. In the last 6 years, India's installed renewable energy capacity has increased 2.5 times to about 90 gigawatt. Solar energy installed capacity has increased by about 13 times. In the electricity mix, the share of non-hydro renewables has increased from 5.5% to about 12%. If hydro included, the share has reached about 24%. Non-fossil fuel sources now constitute about 37% of the installed electricity capacity. The pace of growth of renewables is much faster than other power sources. India is now among the top 3 fastest growing countries in renewable energy capacity addition. The approach to support renewables deployment includes a mix of fiscal and financial incentives, facilitative policies, and mandates. Diverse policy instruments have been put in place. You can see major ones on the screen. These interventions help usher in a favorable investment climate, sent right signals to all stakeholders, and also gradually made renewables more competitive. The policy prescriptions are continuously reviewed and fine-tuned to address the emergent challenges. The ongoing efforts are focused on making renewable energy output more stable and dispatchable. Mainstreaming renewables in India's energy supply is a critical dimension of India's 2030 vision. India's focus is to economically deploy even larger share of renewables in the energy mix. Seamless integration of renewables into the grid and better grid stability is a priority. The goal is to capture technological advances in deployment and focus on sustained and steady growth. The current focus is on developing clear roadmap for new technological areas, including offshore wind energy and hydrogen and fuel cells. We consider energy storage crucial and critical component of India's thrust to renewables. Larger private sector participation will continue to be encouraged. Foreign investors are welcome to enter into financial and/or technological collaborations. Renewable energy plants offer very good opportunity to the businesses to leapfrog technologies and create volumes. There is sustained push to create a robust ecosystem for manufacturing and development of products and technologies. Further, it is aimed to achieve accelerated economy-wide diversification of renewables, including in agriculture and industry sectors. Thanks for kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Maithani. And now I turn to Dr. Tareq Emtairah to share the international cooperation being pushed by UNIDO. Tareq.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and allow me at the start to thank the organizers behind the Innovation for Cool Earth Forum, ICEF, and to thank the steering committee, the government of Japan, represented by MITI and NATO, for bringing this important edition of the forum in these unprecedented and difficult times. ICEF is an important platform for us to engage with in advancing international climate cooperation and learn from each other. With this, I also want to thank you for inviting me on behalf of UNIDO to share our own experiences and reflections related to the theme of this session, International Cooperation Coordination on Advancing the Climate Agenda. As a start, allow me to share a brief background about the work of UNIDO for those not familiar with our work, then focus on specific areas where we have been active and where we still see strong need for multilateral work and international solidarity to bring every country, developed and developing, on board with the climate agenda and achieving zero carbon societies. Broadly speaking, as one of the UN specialized agencies, UNIDO is primarily focused on industrial transformation as means for both creating shared prosperity and safeguarding the environment. Part of this work is carried by the Department of Energy, where I myself work, and we have been working with two broad challenges. The first is about delinking growth in manufacturing value addition from emissions, and the second is about ensuring a level playing field for developing countries and their industry through facilitating access and creating economic opportunities from climate innovation and technological advances in the climate space. Emphasizing this point, I think this is important in the spirit of what we call the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030, that is leaving no one behind, specifically the vulnerable youth and women. So the question, how do we approach these two specific challenges, and how do we work with our function as a UN agency, as a convener, facilitator of international cooperation and coordination? On the delinking of manufacturing growth from emissions, we have primarily focused on the untapped potential of industrial energy efficiency, where we see close to 20 to 30% potential for quick wins in reducing emissions, but where the knowledge and the capacities are unevenly distributed across regions. Hence, we worked across borders to broaden cooperation and facilitate international standards and best practices such as the ISO 50001 standards for energy management in industrial facilities, and providing knowledge sharing hubs such as the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator you see on the slide, where we try to amplify country experiences and bring economies of scale in capacity building, learning, and provision of policy and technical guidance. The second area where the international development community needs to step up support is in facilitating access to low carbon and affordable basic infrastructure to power industrial development. The case is more acute in least developing countries where an increase, let's say in manufacturing value addition from 10 to 20 or 30% can bring enormous socioeconomic benefit, but also carry enormous climate implications. So the focus here is on ensuring appropriate capacities in public sector entities for integrated planning and market coordination to avoid lock-in into polluting infrastructure. Hence, facilitate a greater integration of low-carbon alternatives, for example, energy supply for industrial parks, rural industrialization, logistics infrastructure such as port and transport. In all these areas, international coordination can play an important role to facilitate build-up of adequate capacities in frontier markets, particularly countries with weak institutions or vulnerable political situation, and that is to ensure projects are climate-proof, learn from best practices, and countries supported with access to concessional and climate finance. The third area I wanted to highlight with enormous potential for linking the climate agenda with the industrial development goals is related to enabling conducive ecosystems for innovation and entrepreneurship for climate mitigation adaptation. And of course, with that, increasing the participation of homegrown enterprises in service delivery of solutions. This is an area where we are active with many partners, including the Global Environmental Facility, the Government of Japan, through the Low Carbon, Low Emission Technology Transfer, or what we call the LSET program, and few other partners. Global partnerships work well here because they bring economies of scale to affect change in tackling the gaps facing many developing markets in capacity building, ecosystem connectivity, and investment facilitation. These interventions can also bring quick wins in terms of green jobs and local SME development in countries with weak supportive ecosystems. International cooperation needs also to be sensitive to regional variations and capabilities. We found that working with regional economic commissions is another useful way to anchor cross-country cooperation and enable a level playing field for low-carbon technology adoption at scale. In UNIDO, we have been working with partner countries such as Austria, Norway, and Spain to facilitate the setup and backstopping of several regional policy and technology centers for accelerating the uptake of renewable energy and energy efficiency. Currently, there are 7 of these centers covering almost 100 member countries and island states. They work through regional economic commissions to enable a convergence on market enabling frameworks, incentives, and standards, thereby catalyze economies of scale for low carbon products and services in what otherwise might be seen as marginal or fragmented markets. Having outlined in broad terms the additionality of international coordination for climate technology transfer, I must also emphasize that the gender dimension and inclusive engagement remains core to the low carbon transition agenda. We have learned from numerous interventions that a gender-sensitive approach in climate and clean energy technology facilitation brings greater socioeconomic benefits than conventional approaches. Given also the situation we are facing today with COVID-19 crisis, we see great challenges facing the rather fledgling clean tech sector in many developing regions, particularly SMEs. In a survey we conducted in June this year among climate SMEs in Asia and the Pacific, in Africa and Asia, Many enterprises are facing liquidity challenges that could put the entire sector at risk. Most recovery packages tend to favor incumbents, and large enterprises and SMEs are left without access to credits and financial life support mechanism. Here again, a call for the international development community and partners to work with governments on targeted support measures for the clean tech SMEs in developing countries. Partly, this echoes also the numerous calls and arguments that the UN system and from other international partners that the economic recovery must be green and must spur growth through low-carbon development pathways. In this spirit, we have repurposed the forthcoming Vienna Energy Forum to explore with expert and policymakers pathways that stimulate demand for clean energy and promote economic recovery in 3 end-use sectors: manufacturing, food systems, and products. We invite you to join us in these dialogues starting early October. With this, I wanted to conclude with highlighting 3 takeaways from our experience working multilaterally on the climate and clean energy agenda. First, international cooperation and coordination facilitate convergence of efforts, knowledge flows, and learning, which is good for innovation. It provides a unique perspective to national stakeholders that otherwise may not be easily accessible. And most importantly, given also the global nature of supply chains and commodity flows, international coordination is definitely needed to achieve far-reaching transformation in end-use sectors toward zero carbon footprints. With this, I conclude and thank you for the opportunity again to speak.
Thank you very much, Tareq. I think this provided us with an overview of the kinds of opportunities as well as the actions that are being taken by UNIDO. And finally, I turn to Mr. Tony Clamp from the Green Climate Fund to share his thoughts with us on the financing of the transition. Tony, all yours. We now move on to your questions, and we have received a series of questions, and I'm taking the liberty of picking up some of them. I think the most important question that everybody is asking is the impact of COVID-19 on the energy sector in developing countries, and in particular, what is the expectation regarding investment trends in renewables in particular, and obviously in fossil fuels as well. And I'm wondering if Mr. Utama or Dr. Maithani can start with it, and then we'll go to the others if they have any comments on it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mathur. I think it is indeed very interesting discussion since in the region itself, Southeast Asia, we are facing a very big impact caused by the COVID-19, where the demand is decreasing significantly, as well as the cost causing the supply reduction in the region. And the region itself have to redesigning the energy planning, especially on the scenario planning, for step forwards overcoming the COVID-19 apart from the economic downturn that facing in the last couple of months. But the reality is saying that the most of the government in 10 member states are right now focusing on the economic recovery. And then it is rather difficult to say that energy will be the priority at the moment. However, the member state also try to focus on some energy sectors which can be beneficial for the short-term and long-term recovery at the moment. And also some of the incentives being delivered in the energy sector as well, especially which the direct impact on the small and medium scale activities or SMEs. So that's happening in the region. Of course, that we need to redesign again on the energy scenario planning for more robust planning in the future, and to make sure that if it is happen again, hopefully it's not, we can overcome it easily, especially on the energy security as well as energy affordability.
Very much, Dr. Utama. Dr. Maithani, would you like to add to Dr. Uttama's comments on the impact of COVID-19?
Yeah, thank you, sir. I'll just brief on the India's experience for during COVID, how it impacted the overall electricity sector. The demand reduced during lockdown period as to certain extent. But at the same time, the share of renewable energy or green energy in the electricity mix increased during that period. It implies that the renewable energy share during the lockdown period has increased, and this was seen as a continuous resilient source of energy, which is not off, and which is providing electricity on continuous basis. At the same time, three important things which have been looked into. One is that the period of lockdown during the COVID in India, around 3 months or so, was treated as a force majeure, particularly those involved in the generation activity and then installing the plants and others. The time period which have been allocated to them, that has been extended to that extent. That was one of the facilitative regime which was created. Apart from that, Government of India and its public sector utilities keep on going for the bidding for renewable energy in a massive way. And around from February onwards, if I say when the COVID started, up to July last bid was in the 6th August 2020, around 8,000 megawatt renewable power capacity has been bidded during that period, and this was oversubscribed in most of the cases. And this was the period when most of the new innovations, particularly looking for peak power from the renewable energy, renewable energy in conjunction with storage systems, renewable energy in the round-the-clock kind of system. These all were experiments were undertaken, innovations were undertaken, and the results were quite encouraging. And we do hope that the way last month trends, which we have seen that the electricity demand has come at par with the last year's trend. So we feel that this COVID, the worst has gone, and we are again in the business as usual kind of situation. Thank you.
Much, PC. Let me turn to you, Tony. What is the expectation from private companies and private finance in tackling global warming? And if there's anything that you'd like to comment on the previous question regarding investments into the renewable energy sector, please feel free to do so as well.
So I'll make a couple of comments. And part of that is related to indeed our own mandate. Look, there's a few things. First of all, the transition, much talked about energy transition, involves, certainly physical risk, but transition risk. And there's a distinction which is worth understanding between the two. Of course, there are risks to many existing businesses, fossil fuel businesses, water-related, many stranded assets and so on. However, we all know that we need to move very rapidly towards the new normal, in the climate sense, and governments and other parties are taking actions, and there are, as a result, new rules. There are new rules, there are new regulations, and that in itself, of course, provides or provides risks. So that's what people are faced with. Now, in practical terms, those are new risks, but they're not, businesses have been exposed to those over many years. Now, what can one do? Now, I'd like to be more positive. There's undoubtedly tremendous investment opportunity for all parties, private and institutional funds, from whatever source right across the world. Every single country has sources of those, more in some, more and less in others, but it's an opportunity. And the obvious example there is renewable energy. These typically, irrespective of whether they are PPA backed or otherwise, they provide long-term, relatively reliable sources of cash flows, which ultimately, back to the retirement, needs, the liabilities, if you like, they're an opportunity for investment. On the other hand, there's a challenge because all of those sources of capital, wherever they may come from, they assess the risks to balance against the returns, and they vary. And in some of the frontier markets, as many parties will say, those are just too much to bear to really mobilize those sources of capital and make big impact. So there is a need for other sources of capital, risk-orientated. That includes the Green Climate Fund and different official public sources, multilateral and otherwise. And we need to find the right way to back the private and institutional capital that is needed to deliver those results. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I think that, I think it's a continuing challenge that we would need to address as we move ahead. Tareq, there is a question regarding the, how do we enable cooperation between the different stakeholders, government, private sector, academia, in international climate cooperation? Are there any models, are there any good best practices that you would like to share?
Truly, yes, definitely. We see quite a lot of these models where what we call them, in UNIDO's jargon or terminology, we call it public-private development partnerships, PPDK, some sort of model, in which we really work as a development partner with the public sector, and especially in Africa, we have piloted this, is especially on the capacity building and training or vocational training, where we bring in the private sector actors to involve with us in terms of knowledge sharing, bring their expertise into the design of curriculums, do an investment in infrastructure related, for example, to testing facilities and laboratories. So these models do exist, and the key issue that, of course, that they do not give privileged access to certain sort of private actors over others, but that they create what is called a broad win-win partnerships generally. And we have seen it also in the way we can sort of, in most of our technical cooperation projects we implement in the countries, either the beneficiaries are the private sector and the civil society community actors, or they are stakeholders in shaping the design. They are stakeholders in shaping the what I call the nature of the interventions that are appropriate to the local level. So there are definitely scope and models for engagement. Back to you, Ajay.
Thanks, Tareq. There is one more question, and I'm not very sure whether any of you would like to or would be able to comment on, and that relates to the Article 6 development. Now, which is aiming at promoting integral, holistic and balanced approaches that will assist countries in implementing their NDCs through voluntary international cooperation. When do we, what would an expected rule book for Article 6 look like? When do we expect it? What would it look like? Any comments on this? Yeah,
I'll try to mention. Thank you, sir. So a lot of work has already been done, and so far as Article 6 rule book is concerned, there are major 2-3 areas where some consensus is really looked into. And we do hope that if some resilience is there, particularly to understand the concerns of some of the countries who have really invested in the climate regime in a big way. So that is one of the areas, transition of the old regime. And second, the methodologies for baseline and additionality. These are the two areas, and we expect that the way things are progressing, some doable agreement perhaps we can look for in the next COP, which is scheduled to happen in UK. And but I'm sure that if a balanced regime is there, this will Article 6 provisions will certainly be a major input for transfer of for increasing the ambitions, as well as creating new kind of technological regimes within some of the countries. And this will also help in international cooperation. And Mr. Tareq has mentioned that this will be an instrument for that also. So this cannot be seen in isolation. It will be linked with some kind of finances as well as some kind of projects, and which encompasses all form of the green technological addition in some of the countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maithani. We will end here. We are, I think, at the end of our time. Actually, time passed very, very fast, and I want to thank all our speakers for their extremely interesting presentations. If I had to do an overarching picture, I would say that there is, first of all, there's a lot of action happening. We are moving towards transitions, whether it is economic transitions, whether it is institutional transitions. I would also note that international cooperation, whether through institutional means as in ASEAN or through the provision of support as has been done through UNIDO or through financial support as being done by GCF, have become the pillars on which this movement, this transition occurs. Also, it seems to me that there must be a lot of cross-learning that is occurring as a result of this discussion. With this movement, I think the ability of countries to be able to take benefit of both the early learners, the early adopters, as well as of the ability to adopt the benefits of decreasing costs are things that will only accelerate the transition. I would, however, warn that there is a backlash from the existing fossil fuel industry. There are a lot of people who are invested in it. There are companies, there are organizations, and there is money in it. That obviously hurts. And consequently, we need to carry those interests with us as well. Get them into the renewable energy sector rather than pushing out these players who are there. I think in terms of the ICEF session, this has contributed towards an understanding of where we are and, more importantly, the direction in which we are moving. I again thank all our panelists, Dr. Utama, Dr. Maithani, Mr. Tareq Emtairah, Tony Clamp, for participating in this, for their excellent presentations, and particularly for their insights. I think that really helped in moving this discussion ahead. And finally, to all of you, the speakers, very many thanks for joining us, for your questions, and for making this successful. ICEF is, after all, there because you are there. To the ICEF Secretariat, many thanks for making this possible in this day and age where, through virtual means, we are continuing with the tradition of bringing together cutting-edge knowledge in the ICEF forum. Very many thanks. Goodbye. And again, whatever part of the day it is, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night to you. Thank you all very much.
Ajay and fellow panelists, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ajay.